Good morning, everyone. I'm Jessica Lopez, Communications Coordinator at United Ag. Welcome to our Health Chat session, where we're diving deep into a topic that touches every aspect of our lives, sleep. I'd like to welcome Dr. Rosemary Koo to shed some light on the importance of sleep. Rosemary?
Thanks so much, Jessica. I will advance the screen. First, want to thank our sponsors here, Cyene, Blue Shield of California, and Elite Medical. And thank you all for joining us today to talk about sleep. We're going to be covering pretty broad territory here. I'm going to first talk a bit about sleep deprivation and the importance of sleep. And then we'll talk about what's good sleep, the factors that impact sleep, tips for better sleep, and the resources that we have at United Ag to help you. And lastly, we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. But throughout the presentation, feel free to also chat in your questions and we can get to them at the end. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. 40% of Americans do not get the recommended amount of sleep, which is 7 to 9 hours each night. So if you're not getting at least 7 hours of sleep each night, you're not alone, but that's not necessarily a good thing because just one night of sleep deprivation can impact your thinking ability. So if you haven't slept for about 17 hours, your cognition is equivalent to a blood alcohol level of 0.05%. And if you have pulled an all-nighter and haven't slept for 24 hours, your cognition is at the same level of a blood alcohol level of 0.1%, which is past the legal driving limit. So sleep deprivation is really critical for alertness and your ability to problem solve and react. And with these stats, it's not surprising that sleep deprivation is actually responsible for about 100,000 car crashes per year in the US. And I have a story around this that's not necessarily related to driving, but during residency, I was in the class, probably the last class that we still did 36-hour calls overnight in the hospital. And every time after I would come home after one of those long shifts, I would actually routinely almost get hit by a car or a bus. So I can certainly attest to definitely the impaired cognition after not sleeping enough. And this really kind of makes you pause and think, well, if I'm basically at the level of acting as if I were under the influence of alcohol, if I'm not getting enough sleep, is this really the best time to be making business decisions, making big life decisions, having important conversations, or, something as simple as driving? But this is just the kind of acute impact from day to day is the impact on cognition. But over time, chronic sleep deprivation can actually wreak a lot of havoc in your bodies. It increases the risk of all these conditions that we're all trying to avoid, such as obesity, type 2 diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure, and also mental health conditions. And if you're worried about cancer, sleep deprivation actually increases the risk of certain cancers, including breast cancer, ovarian cancer, prostate, and colorectal cancer. And so, if you think about a healthy lifestyle, getting enough sleep is a simple thing that you can do each day to help decrease your risk of all these chronic conditions, including some cancer risk as well. And so it might seem like nothing is happening during sleep. You're just lying there, not really doing anything. But that couldn't be further from the truth. There's so many biological, physiological processes happening during sleep. A lot of hormones are being released, a lot of chemical reactions are happening that help your tissues repair. So if you've worked out or exerted yourself in any way, sleep is where all of your tissues are trying to recover and regrow and heal. A lot of important hormones, such as human growth hormone and cortisol, are regulated by sleep. Growth hormone is especially important for building strength, especially if you're doing any sort of physical movement, also for physical recovery as well. And for children, this is actually really important for growth, as its name suggests. And interestingly, I had a cousin when he was an adolescent, he was diagnosed with ADHD, and a lot of the ADHD medications impact sleep. And so, because of his young age, he was still in growth phases. But because he wasn't getting enough sleep, his growth was actually stunted for some time. But then, once he started working with his doctor to, kind of get to a better medication regimen to help him sleep better, he actually grew a few inches within a very short period of time. So, the impact on adults is pretty significant in terms of our overall health and metabolism. But for children, this is also incredibly important for their development. Also, sleep is actually very cleansing for the brain. So, our brain cells actually develop waste products because of their own cellular metabolism. So, they have waste that they have to get rid of, and their toxins that have to be kind of rid of in the brain. And that all happens during sleep. And so when people don't sleep enough, all of that kind of waste material actually accumulates in the brain and can actually increase your risk of conditions such as Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease and other neurodegenerative conditions as well. Sleep is also incredibly important for emotional regulation. When we don't get enough sleep, there's certain parts of the brain, such as the amygdala, that actually become overactive. So this can actually trigger a lot of anxiety, lower impulse control, and this can actually make it harder for you to perceive other people's emotional cues accurately and to respond appropriately. So if you ever feel like, someone is acting really irritably or is kind of hot and cold and having a lot of mood swings, that could actually be related to poor sleep. Sleep is also really important for the development of memory. And so oftentimes when people are sleep deprived, one of the first things to go is their memory. So they find themselves absent-minded, forgetting where they put the keys, forgetting to do things regularly. Memory is incredibly closely tied to sleep quality and quantity. And then lastly, immune function is very closely tied to sleep. Funny enough, a lot of the early research studies to help us understand the relationship between sleep and our immune system was actually done in medical students. And so they would either study medical students during their exams or actively, prevent them from sleeping to create sleep deprivation. And then they would actually take their blood samples to check different levels of their immune cells. And they would also see how at risk those medical students were of developing sickness. And those who were more sleep deprived had lower immune cells and then also were more likely to get sick. So if you want to, stay healthy, not get viruses, not get, sick from things around you, it's really important to keep up with good sleep. So what exactly is good sleep for adults? I know it's like a kind of a blanket term and we don't really talk about it. And you probably intuitively have a sense for what is good sleep, but here's kind of the markers of good sleep in a very objective list. So first is duration. You need at least 7 to 9 hours of sleep. This is pretty much true for most people. I know there's a lot of people out there, especially when you're younger and you're thinking, oh, I can get by on 4 to 5 hours of sleep regularly and I'm fine. A lot of people say that, and it's not actually true for themselves. In that they do actually put themselves at higher risk of either making poor decisions or really not just functioning at their peak performance. And so, if you find yourself saying, I can get by on lower sleep, I don't need 7 hours, you might want to just like check in and see if that's actually true, because for most people, that's not true. Another hallmark of good quality sleep is that you're able to fall asleep within 30 minutes of the time from the time that you lay down to go to sleep. Sometimes if people are falling asleep immediately, like if you feel like as soon as your head hits the pillow, you fall asleep, that's actually a little bit different from this. That actually could be a sign of sleep deprivation. So if you fall asleep super fast, that might be a sign of sleep deprivation. But in general, you want to be able to fall asleep within about 30 minutes. You also want to wake up less one time or less per night. And a wake up is really defined as being awake for 5 minutes. And generally, this is long enough time that you can remember whether or not you've woken up. Also, if you have a smartwatch, you might, see kind of lines where you've woken up in the middle of the night if you're using your smartwatch to monitor or any other wearable to monitor your sleep. Those will usually track the times that you've woken up, but they will often track spikes when you've waken up for less than 5 minutes. Those don't really count as much towards this kind of quality metric. This is really if you've woken up at least 5 minutes. You want that number of times you've woken up to be as minimal as possible. You want your overall time awake during the night to be less than 20 minutes. And this is really more from like research studies, but you want your sleep efficiency or percent of time asleep of the total time you're in bed to be greater or equal to 85%. But probably most importantly, aside from these metrics that you can see from a wearable or your smartwatch, one of the most important things is really how do you feel when you wake up? Do you feel refreshed? Do you feel rested? Or do you actually feel more tired when you wake up? And so, how you feel is a very good indicator of how well you slept. Now, there are a lot of factors that can impact sleep, and some of these might not be totally obvious, and some might be. But I'll go through kind of the general things that can impact your sleep. The first is personal circadian rhythm. So, your circadian rhythm is really just your natural sleep rhythm, and everyone's a little bit different here. So there might be a certain time of day that you like to fall asleep, and then are you a morning person, a night person? There are some people who are biphasic sleepers that they would prefer to be able to break up their sleep into two sections during the day instead of sleeping one long phase at night. But there is individual variability here that, people like to, fall asleep, get up at different times. This is really your own personal body's rhythm. And it's important to try to structure your day around that type of natural rhythm if you can. The second is mental health or stress. This can have a huge impact on sleep. If any of you remember your dreams, although I know not everyone can remember their dreams, but if you ever do, if you're going through a stressful time, often the things that you dream about are related to that stress in one way or another. If you have mental health, anxiety, depression, all of that can impact your ability to fall asleep and stay asleep. And so mental health has a huge impact on how well you sleep and your duration of sleep. Also, your physical discomfort. If you're having pain or any other physical discomfort, achiness, that can certainly wake you up at night. It can also make it harder to fall asleep. In those cases, definitely reach out to your doctor to see what you can do to help alleviate that discomfort. Also physical therapy or talking to someone about body position can also help. For some people, say if you have back pain and that is impacting your sleep, something as simple as sleeping with a pillow under your knees, or if you're a side sleeper, sleeping with your pillow between your knees, can actually make a huge difference in how well you sleep. Your sleep environment is also really important. So you want to make sure that there is as little as possible disturbances in your sleep environment. So things like light or noise, you want to be able to minimize. So blackout curtains, if you want a like white noise machine, not everything is within your control in your sleep environment, but whatever you can do to make it a very comfortable environment for you that minimizes disturbances from your sleep is really important. Also, a cooler environment is generally more conducive for sleep for most people. Nutrition can also play a big role in your sleep. So sometimes people actually wake up in the middle of the night because they're hungry or their blood sugar drops. This can be especially important for those who have diabetes and are on diabetes medicines, but it could also really just happen to anyone. If that seems to be happening, if you're waking up with hunger, you might want to have a small snack before you go to bed at night. But for most people, you actually want a few hours between your last meal and your bedtime. And that way you can fully digest. Because if you go to bed with a full stomach, that can actually increase risk of acid reflux, which can impact your sleep. So acid reflux or GERD is a big issue for a lot of people. It's actually a very common one as well. Exercise can also have a big impact on sleep, and this impact is usually very individual. Some people love exercising before they sleep. It creates like the perfect kind of sleep environment for them. And for others, it keeps them up at night. So see how you feel with the exercise and kind of make adjustments to see what's best for you. For most people, doing heavy aerobic exercise before bed usually keeps them up. So if you want to exercise before bed, usually something lighter like yoga or gentle stretching is usually better for most people. But again, this is very individual. This will probably be no surprise to you is that substances can impact sleep. Caffeine actually takes about 15 hours for most people to mostly clear for your system. So if you're having caffeine after 12 noon, you probably still have some in your system by the time you're trying to go to bed. So make sure you don't have caffeine past noon as early in the morning as possible. Alcohol is another substance that most people think actually helps sleep, but it really doesn't. Alcohol will probably, for most people, get you to go to sleep, like it can induce sleep easier, but it actually impacts your REM activity. So your overall quality of sleep is actually lower if you've had alcohol near your bedtime. And a lot of medications can impact sleep. And so, if you're worried or kind of curious about if any of the medications you're taking can impact sleep, ask your doctor about it. Because I mentioned the ADHD medicines for my cousin. A lot of other medications can impact sleep, even things like beta blockers for blood pressure control can impact melatonin production, so which can impact sleep. So, ask your doctor about whether or not anything you're taking could impact sleep and what you should do about it. Screen time is a big deal for sleep, especially the blue light emission. Although a lot of our devices these days have settings where you can set a timer for when it switches to more of that warm hue light instead of the blue light emission. So if you have that setting, I do encourage you to use that on both your computers and your phones, and then to also set kind of a deadline for when you're just going to put down your screen, not pick up your phone, not look at your computer anymore. And then lastly, certain health conditions and sleep disorders can impact sleep. Endocrine conditions like thyroid, whether your thyroid function is low or high, that can impact sleep. Cardiovascular conditions such as palpitations can impact your quality of sleep. And regarding sleep disorders, probably the biggest one that comes to mind is obstructive sleep apnea that can impact both men and women of all ages, all sizes. And if you find that you are snoring regularly or still feeling tired after getting at least 7 hours of sleep, you might actually have sleep apnea. So definitely ask your doctor about getting tested and treated for that. A lot of these sleep disorders don't even require going to a sleep lab anymore, by the way. So it's so much easier these days to actually get tested for these sleep disorders. Usually they can just send you home with a sleep kit that monitors your oxygenation, movement, all that kind of data while you sleep in your very own home, and they can diagnose you remotely. So don't be afraid to ask your doctor about those kind of options. So here are some tips for better sleep. The first and probably most important tip is to keep a consistent sleep schedule. And that's on days that you work and days that you don't work. For most people, that's on the weekdays and the weekends. You know, we tend to want to sleep in on the weekends, stay up late on Friday night, etc. That can actually mess with your circadian rhythm. Your body wants to, your body is very habitual as far as sleep goes. And having a more regular sleep schedule can actually make it easier to fall asleep. You also want to invest in your bedtime routine. And I don't necessarily mean invest money, but really invest time in creating a routine for yourself that gets your body and mind ready for sleep. Again, consistency and habits really are key for creating better sleep. So whether that's taking like a hot shower or doing a little bit of reading, stretching before bed, whatever you want to do to kind of prepare your mind and body, and just do it on a regular basis. So, take some time to plan for it and invest in your bedtime routine. We've already kind of talked about avoiding late night eating and alcohol. We also touched upon lowering your bedroom temperature. For most people, the ideal temperature is about 65 degrees. So that might sound low to some folks, but the reason why a lower bedroom temperature is important is because your body temperature naturally falls towards the evening as you're kind of getting ready for bed. And it's an important physiological signal for inducing sleep. And so if your room is too warm, it can actually be harder to fall asleep. And probably most of you experience that anecdotally at some point in time, that if the weather's really hot, it's harder to fall asleep. But 65 degrees is typically the temperature that's best for most people. And similarly, a hot shower or bath before bed can kind of create the same effect of lowering your body temperature. So the transition from a warm or hot shower to kind of your cooler bedroom helps kind of induce that same type of sleepiness from reducing your body temperature. Again, set cutoff times for screens. And then probably one of the most interesting tips for better sleep is, how do you strategically nap? So for most people, it's recommended that naps are around 20 minutes and not longer than 30 minutes if you're going to nap. And you want your naps to be probably at least 8 to 6 hours before your bedtime, so that it doesn't interfere with when you're going to bed overnight. However, there are certain cases where you might need to actually take a longer nap. And those are for cases, say you have a new baby where you're really not sleeping at all overnight, or if you're a shift worker, or if there's anything else going on in your life where you really just can't sleep well overnight, like if you're taking care of a sick family member or something like that. It might be worthwhile to actually take a longer nap during the day if you can, closer to 90 minutes, if so that you can get in a full sleep cycle. This is not recommended on a regular basis to kind of take long naps. Usually the regular recommendation is, as I said, kind of shorter 20-minute naps. But during those times where you really can't get sleep at night, that might be a better option to be able to get in at least some sleep during the day if you have time for a full sleep cycle. And then here are the United Ag resources for you. If you have any issues with your sleep, this is not something that you need to try to deal with alone. I mean, there's a lot you can read on Google and the internet, sure, but it's always good to also get a professional opinion. You can always reach out to our health and wellness clinics. They are very much well equipped to talk about lifestyle factors, including sleep. If you want one-on-one coaching for sleep and other areas of lifestyle, our lifestyle management program is available to you at no extra cost. The coaches there are wonderful. They also provide nutrition and exercise one-on-one guidance as well. Earlier, I mentioned that mental health is a big factor for sleep. So if you feel like you're going through a situation or have mental health concerns that are impacting your quality of life, we do have Spring Health now as a resource. So please reach out to them. And they have not only their practitioners and therapists, but they also have a ton of resources on their own website and app as well to help you. And then we also have Teledoc as further counseling services and any kind of medical care that you might need. So we have a lot of resources that can help you with sleep, so you don't have to suffer alone if you feel like you're not sleeping well. So with that, I know I threw a lot at you, and we'll open up the floor for questions. And thank you, Sam. I see your question here already in the chat. So go ahead. You can also add questions into chat. But Sam has asked, can you touch on the health implications of taking an over-counter sleep aid such as melatonin and how it impacts your sleep? Thank you. That's a great question. And it's probably one of the most common questions people have when they're trying to get better sleep is, can you take something? Melatonin is, for some people, actually works very well. And for situations such as like jet lag or traveling, it's especially effective. For some people, I do want to caution is that it can make mental health conditions worse. So the best thing to do if you're interested in an over-counter sleep aid such as melatonin is to ask your doctor about it. Um, or you could also try starting off with a small dose and see if that helps. But the most important thing, ask your doctor for their guidance on what you can take. There's also a lot of sleep aids and tea that are also quote unquote over the counter that you can get in the grocery store that can help. Things like valerian root, linden flower, chamomile, lavender, all those kind of calming teas can also help, but that's on a very individual basis. But yeah, there's a lot you can do as far as try as far as supplements, lifestyle changes, and sleep environment to help get better sleep. Any other questions?
Rosemary, I have a question.
Mhm.
I've heard that there are different times to sleep at night for recommended times, I should say, for males and females. Like males could probably do like 7 to 8, or and females 9 to 10. Do you have some insight about that?
That's a great question. I don't know how strong the evidence is for that. Generally, for most people, it's still the 7 to 9 hour window. And actually, if someone's getting more than 9 hours of sleep on a regular basis, that could actually be a sign that someone has other health issues. So I would say for generally, for everyone, 7 to 9 hours is a good range to shoot for, regardless of gender?
Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
great question. Mhm. Any other questions? I don't know, Jess, should we allow everyone to talk or?
Yeah,
Okay.
we could definitely have them unmute themselves.
Or I guess in the meantime, Jess, do you have any announcements you'd like to provide to the audience?
Yeah, we have another health chat scheduled for next month, and it's called What Really Happens in Therapy. And we're going to have a special guest from Spring Health that will come in and break down um, the sessions, what it looks like when you go through therapy. So look out for those invites.
Wonderful. That will be a great session. All right. Any last minute questions? If not, we can go ahead and close here. And thank you all for joining me today. And we'll talk next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary, for your presentation.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you all. Bye bye now.